All right, we are back for another episode of Good Vibes. I'm Martin Falls, joined by our transformation coach, Debbie Cox DeNova. She's with us today with another great topic. When I was looking at it, I was thinking many people out there, they're going to love to hear this topic, including myself, and it is bulletproofing your relationship. Wow, what a doozy today.
What a doozy. And
How
this
are
is
you,
for people who, I'm doing great, thank you. These are people who are in relationships or actually thinking about relationships because, and as with all of these conversations on relationships, I'm approaching it as a student, someone who doesn't want to be a continued statistic. So if at home you have some dissatisfaction in your relationships, or you are on the outside of a relationship looking to produce one, you may want to get a pen and paper because we've got some really great things that are going to help you to bulletproof your relationship so that you don't become a statistic. Because right now what we're looking at in marriage specifically, first marriages, 50% divorce rate. When you get to your second marriage, a 67% divorce rate. By the third time, 73%.
Right.
So those are very, very grim statistics. So what we want to do is walk intentionally and consciously into relationships so that we can bulletproof ourselves so as not to become
And
one
it's
of
fair to both parties, because if you take your time and you know your partner, you're doing each other a favor.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So let's talk about the things that come up against marriages to begin with. Okay, so once we know the enemy, then we can actually start to address it.
Yeah.
Number one is high expectations. Number two is indifference. Number three is neglect. 4 is violence. And 5 is contempt. So let's go through this one at a time. High expectations.
Right.
So we have now, and this is a very recent development, we are now expecting out of our partners a whole community of people. We've talked about this before. Back not so long ago, marriage was specifically about producing children, and each party had their own set of rules and expectations. And, it didn't necessarily mean that we have to have these deep conversations on the couch in order to be successful or happy. Marriage was what it is. Now we're more separated as people, and we're starting to look to our partners to be a best friend and a passionate lover and a confidant, and all of these things that used to be fulfilled by a whole community of people are now being are expected out of a one-person situation. Esther Perel, who is a famous psychotherapist around relationships, says that when she polls people, very few people will actually be able to and ask them can you think of people in your life who have a successful relationship, a happy relationship that you would like to model after? She says people can come up with maybe 1 or 2 couples. It's crazy the expectations that we have now, and high expectations really are a precursor to resentment because people hardly ever fulfill those expectations.
Yeah, and I'm probably giving away a secret, but every time I see my friends, they go, "You don't know how lucky you are," and I'm going, "You better not say that too loud." Now, I won't tell you if the female said it or the male said it. That way, we have anonymity.
I get it. Believe me. All right, let's talk about indifference. Indifference is another killer. It's this kind of laid back, kind of like, I don't care, putting all of your value into other people, other situations instead of your partner. So we pour into and put value into the dating process, and then once we're married, then it's like, okay, well, I've got other things that I need to do, and we sort of take our hands off the wheel as far as that's concerned. Again, we don't do that with anything else. We don't expect our businesses to thrive if we leave them alone to fend for themselves like cactuses.
So what do they feel like they've just won the prize? And it could be the woman or the man. They've won the prize and they just get complacent?
Yeah, they just get complacent. That spark goes away. So it's really about creating that balance between closeness and also separation. And I think that's where people start to get that passion ignited. Statistically speaking, women actually lose interest or in sex in the marriage pretty quickly after they're married, right? Men, not so much. It's a slow decline for men, but for women in monogamous relationships, their sex desire goes completely down. And the reason that's true is because the essential element of romance starts to be missing in the context of marriage, right? And that is the seductive plot is no longer there, and that's an essential element for getting a woman turned on. So then she becomes indifferent and she no longer wants sex. This has always been read as that women lose sex in marriage, but it's really that they lose interest in the sex that is available within their marriage because,
You just bummed out a lot of guys out there.
Maybe I bummed them out, or maybe we're inspiring people to actually go for
I knew you would have an
romantic
angle
plot.
to get them back, though. I knew that.
Don't be indifferent. Number 3 is neglect, and again, this goes back to what are you investing into your person? Actually going in and realizing and recognizing that anything that you don't invest into is simply not going to do well. So neglect is another one. And then we have number 4, which is violence. And violence doesn't have to be physical violence. We're talking about micro threats too, right? Just contemptuous little antagonistic things that we say to each other, insults, things like that. Those are micro violence. And of course, it can include physical violence as well.
Right.
And then the 5th one is contempt. This is a relationship killer. This is actually a good determinant of whether or not someone is going to get divorced, whether they have contempt in their communications. It's also a great determinant, we talked about this before, about the number of illnesses that someone's going to get if they're a recipient of contempt. And contempt really is that experience of you're done, you're dead to me, I can't stand you. It's these little looks, right? And once you've gotten to that point, you're in the danger zone in relationship.
Right.
So it's really about who do you want to be going into the relationship, not how much you expect out of the other person, but who do you want to be as a partner in relationship is a really powerful question to ask.
I want to know, how do you get past some of these? They seem like you can't get past them, but
You certainly can.
I'm listening. I'm listening. So is the audience.
Yeah. So the number one thing you want to think about is calibrating your expectations. It really is an impossible task to put someone in charge of your happiness in so many different areas. So women, you may need to share your secrets with your girlfriends, and guys are going to go out and do their activities with their guy friends. And then you have your specific expectations set clearly within the relationship. The other thing is remembering again how you show up matters, okay? Instead of looking to the other person to fulfill you, coming into the relationship of how can I be responsible for my experience in this relationship and show up the way that I want to, right? So that even if things don't go well, and they always won't, right? There's always going to be disappointments within the relationship, that you are able to be responsible for your experience and to speak responsibly so that you can come together for repair, because repair is a huge part of this. If you are doing your relationship right, you're going to have relationship ruptures along the way. And the repair process is really where you create that fortitude and that strength going along. So it's rupture, repair in an ideal situation. If you're repairing all along the way and you're really good at that, and that takes, again, a level of responsibility, coming to the table as a we instead of me versus you, it's like we against the problem, right? And being able to solve that and doing it all along the way. They're not going to bed angry and upset with each other, really keeping a short account of like, what is it that's in between us so that we can repair and bring that together. Eli Finkel, who is a professor of social psychology at Northwestern University, says there are 3 things that you need for a great relationship: mutual respect, mutual trust, and mutual affection, all of which you need to be able to actually move intentionally in order to create this. Respect, of course, is something where you are allowing the other person to have their life, right? Their life outside of you, and you're watching. When they did polls on people asking them when their partners were most attractive to them, all of it centered around this confident, independent state. When he's in his element doing what she's doing, when I see her out there doing, there's an attraction. There has to be a distance in order for there to be that intensity of attraction. So you want to make sure that you are having your separate lives and that you're coming back together. There's a both and. You're separating and you're coming back together and giving the person the opportunity to be the independent person that you fell in love with in the first place, so that you can have that respect.
When you say repair, immediately what came to my mind was Bill Clinton, who was constantly repairing. But which leads to my point, couldn't there be different goals that make people stay together?
Yeah, 100%.
Theirs was political, I think.
Yes, and
Could be wrong.
that goes back to the conversation about expectations, right? Because all across the world, and actually in the United States is very rare, we actually are one of those places that has these high expectations for relationships. In most of the world, it still is about, parenting, creating children together, and, functioning versus like pleasure and passion and fun, right? And so you have to define between the two of you what is your expectation for the relationship. And you have to have enough similarities that you're going to move forward. You have to have the same values, the same vision. Esther Perel says that creating a love story is not necessarily the same as creating a life story. You can create a love story with many different people all along the way, but are you compatible enough to create a life story together? Those are questions that you need to come to the table on and actually ask those questions. So conflict resolution is a really important one, really being available for smoothing things over, and then forgetting the past so that you can move forward cleanly together.
Now, let me ask you something, because you said violence was number 4, and then contempt was the biggest. I would
Well,
imagine some people could get past violence through counseling, but once you have contempt, it's hard to dig yourself out.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear, those are not in order of importance.
Right,
Those are just,
correct.
there's just a list. But yes, the violence actually leads to a place of contempt, right? So once you've gotten to a place where you guys are lashing out at each other, you're verbally assaulting each other, then contempt comes really closely after, and that's the number one killer of intimacy. And you know, relationships are so important. We are relational creatures. So the way that we relate to each other, it directly impacts the quality of our lives. So it's a very important thing. You have to know, like, are our visions similar enough? Are our values similar enough? Do we approach? Were we raised for independence, or were we raised for interdependent relationship? You need to know these things going in so that you can know if you're compatible enough to make it all the way.
Yeah, because when me and you have talked before, Offset, when you're looking at someone, you want to make sure you make that decision before you really dive in, right?
You really do. You really do. And then the other thing is that you want to create novel experiences between the two of you. When you do things that you've done all the time before that you enjoy, that enhances the friendship. But if you want desire, if you want long-term, like, creating